The battle with Grendel's mother. Beowulf accepts Hrothgar's challenge, and the king and his men accompany the hero to the dreadful lair of Grendel's mother. Fearlessly, Beowulf prepares to battle the terrible creature. He leaped into the lake, would not wait for anyone's answer. The heaving water covered him over. For hours he sank through the waves. At last he saw the mud of the bottom. Okay, I want to pause right there. He swam to the bottom of the lake for hours. Let's just imagine maybe 5 hours. Let's talk about 5 hours trying to swim to the bottom of a lake. We're not talking about an ocean here. We're talking about a lake. It took hours to get to the bottom. That is insane. So I need you to imagine how deep this lake is. And all at once, the greedy she-wolf, who had ruled those waters for 500 years, discovered him. She saw that a creature from above had come to explore the bottom of her wet world. She welcomed him in with her claws, clutched at him savagely, but could not harm him. Tried to work her fingers through the tight ring-woven mail on his breast, but tore and scratched in vain. So, for some reason, she was not able to hurt him or mess up his armor that he had on. She then carried him, armor and sword and all, to her home. He struggled to free his weapon and failed. The fight brought other monsters swimming to see her catch. A host of sea beasts who beat at his mail shirt, stabbing with tusks and teeth as they followed along. He then realized, suddenly, that she'd brought him into someone's battle hall, and there the water's heat could not hurt him, nor anything else in the lake attack him through the building's high arching roof. A brilliant light burned all around him, the lake itself like a fiery flame. Okay, so he swam to the bottom of this lake for hours, met Grendel's mother. She tries to harm him, cannot, so she tries to take him back to his house. And on the way, dozens and dozens of other giant sea monsters and just evil, crazy monsters. Just imagine that you're in hell. These are all of the devil's creatures here, are trying to attack him. And next thing he knows, he's in a giant, kind of like a stadium. Imagine the Dallas Cowboys stadium or a football stadium. He's in a giant stadium where they're going to fight. And he's unable to be harmed by anything in the water or the water itself. But he's in a giant stadium about to fight all these monsters by himself. So he's in the stadium right now. Then he saw the mighty water witch and swung his sword, his ring-marked blade, straight at her head. The iron sang its fierce song, sang Beowulf's strength, but her guests discovered that no sword could slice her evil skin, that hunting could not hurt her, was useless now when he needed it. They wrestled. She ripped and tore and clawed at him, bit holes into his helmet, and that too failed him. For the first time in years of being worn into war, it would earn no glory. So finally, after her trying to beat his armor off and get to where she could actually hurt him, his armor is beginning to fail. She is able to bite through it. She's tearing it apart. So he's about to be to where she can hurt him. It was the last time anyone would wear that armor, but Beowulf longed only for fame, leaped back into battle. He tossed his sword aside, angry. The steel-edged blade lay where he dropped it. If weapons were useless, he'd use his hands, the strength of his fingers. So fame comes to the men who mean to win it and care about nothing else. He raised his arm and seized her by the shoulder. Anger doubled his strength. He threw her on the floor. She fell. Grendel's fierce mother and the Geat's proud prince was ready to leap on her, but she rose at once and repaid him with her clutching claws, wildly tearing at him. So it is a real battle right now. It's going back and forth. He does something good, she does something good. He does something good, she does something good. He was weary, that best and strongest of soldiers. His feet stumbled, and in an instant she had him down, held helpless. Squatting with her weight on his stomach, she drew a dagger, which is a sword or a knife, brown with dried blood from someone else, and prepared to avenge her only son. Avenge is to repay his death. But she was stretched on his back, and her stabbing blade was blunted by the woven mail shirt he wore on his chest. The hammered links held the points, could not touch him. He had traveled to the bottom of the earth, Edgoth's son, and died there, if that shining woven metal had not helped. And holy God, who sent him victory, gave judgment for truth and right, ruler of the heavens. Once Beowulf was back on his feet and fighting. So she had him pinned down and almost killed him, but luckily pieces of his armor were still on him and saved him. Then he saw, hanging on the wall, a heavy sword hammered by giants, strong and blessed with their magic. The best of all weapons, but so massive, which is huge, that no ordinary man could lift its carved and decorated length. So this sword is huge, and apparently he shouldn't be able to hold it, but it's magical. It was blessed by the giants, which we all know magic means something in the story. He drew it from its scabbard, broke the chain on its hilt, and then, savage, now angry and desperate, lifted it high over his head and struck with all the strength that he had left, caught her in the neck and cut it through, broke bones and all. Her body fell to the floor, lifeless. The sword was wet with her blood, and Beowulf rejoiced at the sight. So he just picked up this giant magical sword. He was barely able to lift it. He used just the last amount of strength he had left, and then he swung, and he just so happened to cut off her head. The brilliant light shone suddenly, as though burning in that hall, and as bright as heaven's own candle lit the sky. He looked at her home, then, following along the wall, went walking, his hands tight on the sword, his heart still angry. He was hunting another dead monster, and took his weapon with him for final revenge against Grendel's vicious attacks. His nighttime raids over and over, coming to harrow it when Hrothgar's men slept, killing them in their bed, eating some of them on the spot. 15 or more, and running back to his loathsome moor, with another such sinking meal waiting in his pouch. So he was just recapping on everything Grendel used to do before he died, and he just got mad again about how evil Grendel was. But Beowulf repaid him for those visits. He found him lying dead in the corner, armless, exactly as the fierce fighter had sent him out of Harrowit, and then struck off his head with a single swift blow. The bloody jerked for the last time, then lay still. So, Grendel is dead. He's been dead for a couple of days now. His dead body is lying over in the corner at his mom's house. Beowulf finds the dead body, and he's like, you know what, you're not dead enough for me. So then he chops off the head of the dead body. The wise old warriors, who surrounded Hrothgar like him staring into the monster's lakes, saw the waves surging and blood spurting through. So now we're talking about all the men that are still standing up at the top of the lake. They didn't go in the water. They didn't go with Beowulf. They're just standing up at the top of the lake waiting for Beowulf to come back. I mean, it took him hours alone just to get down there. Who knows how long it took for him to actually do the battle and kill Beowulf or to kill Grendel's mother and then chop off Grendel's head. So they've been up there a long time and they're just waiting. And then they start seeing waves in the middle of a lake, and then there's blood coming out. They spoke about Beowulf. All the graybeards whispered together and said that hope was gone, that the hero had lost fame and his life at once, and would never return to the living, come back as triumphant as he left. Almost all agreed that Grendel's mighty mother, the she-wolf, had killed him. So while they were awaiting for Beowulf at the top of this lake, hours had gone by, they see waves, they see blood. They assume that he's dead. They gave up hope on Beowulf. The sun slid over past the noon, went further down. The Danes, Hrothgar's men, gave up. They left the lake and went home, Hrothgar with them. The Geats, who were Beowulf's men, stayed and sat sadly, watching, imagining they saw their lord, but not believing they would ever see him again. Then, the sword, melted, blood-soaked, dripping down like water, disappearing like ice when the world's eternal Lord loosens invisible fetters and unwinds icicles and frost only as he can, he who rules time and seasons, he who is truly God. The monster's hall was full of rich treasures, but all that Beowulf took was Grendel's head and the hilt of the giant's jeweled sword, and the rest that the ring-marked blade had dissolved in Grendel's steaming blood, boiling even after his death. And then the battle's only survivor swam up and away from those loose, silent corpses. The water was calm and clean, the whole lake peaceful, once the demons who lived in it were dead. Okay, so his men are sad. They're sitting there. They think he's dead. But then all of a sudden, here he comes. And he's got the sword, which is half melted because the blood was so toxic from those monsters that it melted the sword. So he's got that half of a sword and Grendel's head. Not the mother's head, just Grendel's head. And he swam up back to the top of the lake. And then the lake calmed down because the evil monsters that were living there are dead. Then that noble protector of all seamen swarmed to land, rejoicing in the heavy burdens he was bringing with him. He and all his glorious band of Geats thanked God that their leader had come back unharmed. They left the lake together. The Geats carried Beowulf's helmet and his mail shirt. Behind them, the water slowly thickened as the monster's blood came seeping up. They walked quickly, happily across the roads all of them remembered, left the lake and cliffs alongside it. Brave men staggering under the weight of Grendel's skull. Too heavy for fewer than 4 of them to handle. Two on each side of the spear jammed through it, yet proud of their ugly load, and undetermined that the Danes seated in Harrowit should see it. So it takes 5 men to carry Grendel's head. I now want you to imagine how big he had to be for 5 men to carry just his head. All it was his head. Okay, so that should give you another idea of how big Grendel was and how big his mother probably was. At the hall, bold and warlike, and with Beowulf, their lord and leader, they walked into the mead hall green. Then the Geats' brave prince entered Harrowit, covered with glory for the daring battles he had fought. He sought Hrothgar to salute him and show Grendel's head. He carried that terrible trophy by the hair, brought it straight in to where the Danes sat, drinking, the queen among them, and it was a weird and wonderful sight, and the warriors stared. So that is the end of the battle with Grendel's mother. This was a very big battle. Hrothgar's men are now completely safe because Grendel and his mother are dead, and it was a very big victory for Beowulf. So now what I would like you to do is get out a piece of paper. You're not going to do this part on a Google Doc. You're going to get out a piece of paper, and I want you to draw me Grendel's mother and what you think the battle hall looked like. So I talked about that giant stadium-like battle hall where Grendel's mother tried to attack Beowulf and kill him. I want you to draw what you think that looked like. And then give me some descriptions like, oh, I think the walls were red. Oh, I think there was no ceiling. Whatever you think, I want you to write it on the back of that paper. Now, I'm not in class today, so you're going to have to keep up with this until I see you next week, okay? Y'all have a good day, and I will see you next week.